Welcome to another behind the scene, and today we have the cable series. We have the Swirl project, Matrix, and Deep Blue. And as you can see, I worked with cables, so these were not created inside of Blender. These are cables that I already had made a couple of years ago, and I just reused them. I'm not a big fan of reusing assets, since I'm sharing those files. I like to create new asset every time, but in this specific case, I really didn't have time to work on something new, so I just reused some old assets that I had, and I came up with kind of this series where my only focus was to work a little bit with the shading. And as you can see, I've been using my ramp generator a lot lately to create this type of color patterns, which are great. As you can see in the first project, I use a lot of subsurface. The second one, I wanted to create some different cable texture. So we have 4 different texture, even 5, I think. The third one was kind of deep blue. So I wanted, color wise to kind of differentiate these projects. The only issue that I had was in the third one. As you can see, I'm always rendering with a denoise at the end. I did have a lot of artifact like this, kind of smudges, and on the texture, this is because when you're using denoising and depth of field, there's a lot of things that are wrong in the end image. So yeah, and let's jump inside of the first project. There's a lot of cables, but everything is just one cable model. So I'm going to close this, and this is the model that I had. So I made this back in 2017, I think, and yeah, I just reuse it for this one. And I think I can show you where this was taken from, and I'm going to scroll here in my project collection for Cinema 4D, and this is it. So this was the project where I took the cables from. As you can see, here are the cable, and this was a collaboration with Observer Doel, a good friend of mine. So be sure to follow him on Instagram. So he is a UI and hard surface designer, great stuff. So be sure to give him a like. But yeah, we've been collaborating on a lot of projects. So as you can see, it's just one OBJ file, and I just duplicated a couple of times and try to place them around my scene, and try to be careful that each cable doesn't intersect with each other. So we have some intersection here on the end, but that doesn't really bother us because I had my camera set up somewhere in the middle here, so we don't see any of those intersection. And I'm going to press on render, and this is what we have. So let's take a look at the shader. So I do have a couple of material here, and I'm going to go through each and every one of them. And one thing that I did to kind of change the geometry was to add a displacement. So I'm going to take off my displacement, and actually I need to show you in one specific cable so you can understand what's happening. And I'm going to apply the displacement. And the displacement, I have a texture coordinate, and here you can play with the height. And as you can see, this will increase the thickness of the geometry, which is pretty nice. It was nice to play around with this, and you can, thin out those cables and play around with the height and even with the noise. And as you can see, it will create this type of displacement abnormality on the cables. So yeah, this was a nice little trick that I found out. So in this specific case, I just used with a very low scale, just so that the cables are not similar to each other, because when we start to duplicate each cable, it will look similar in some cases, but if you apply some displacement in some of them, you can control how this looks. And when it comes to the texturing, again, texture coordinate in the vector, noise, a color ramp with, again, my ramp generator inside of a principal BSDF, and I added a subsurface So you can play around with the scale, with the distortion, and something you can do is just change and see, what fits better. So in this case, when you set the vector to normal, you can see how this is affecting the color ramp here on the shader. The UV is going to give you something different, and the object. So in this case, I use the generate with a low scale, so we can have this nice gradient on the cables. And yeah, right, let's take a look at the second render matrix. And in this case, as you can see here, I use the UV coordinate. As you can see, we have a couple of different texture happening. This affects the green one. So this is the one here down below. Pretty simple setup, UV, color ramp, and the principal shader. We don't have any subsurface, but I did add a coat. Let's take a look at the second texture. These are the gray one. So as you can see, the one here. In this specific case, I ended up using a wave texture to be able to have this type of cable texturing. So as you can see, bend set to Y, and I did have to increase the scale a lot. So you can either increase the scale here or the scale on the wave texture itself. We will have exactly the same outcome. And I tried to add some displacement on these, but it didn't really work well, because as you can see, as I tried to add some displacement, it's not really going to work as I intended. So in this case, I kind of ended up having just a constant black ramp, which means that it doesn't really add anything to the displacement. So I just could have, just not add this. All right, so let's take a look at another texture. So now we have this green one, and as you can see, I wanted to add some details here and some normal. So I added a noise texture, so we can see how this affects the shading. So I'm going to keep this at 0.2, just a little bit. And of course, color ramp inside of the base color, and some displacement. So the displacement, again, just affects just a little bit, so we can have some diversity in the thickness of our cables. Next, we have the white one. So the white one is just the same as the previous one, but we have different color output and without any normal. And that's pretty much it. And for the third project, the deep blue, as you can see, I have a lot of layers here. Everything has been duplicated a couple of times, and I try to do my best to not have any intersecting cables between each other. But I do have some intersection, but I was able to place my camera in a way where we don't really see the intersection. In this case, I'm just going to close my depth of field, and as you can see here, we only have a couple of different shader. So yeah, this is the wave. So I set the coordinate to UV and change the wave axis from the Y that we had in the previous project to the X. So we have this line shape on the cable. So yeah, with one simple model, I was able to create these 3 different projects and work a little bit on the shading side of things. So yeah, simple setup again. I think that I had like 30 minutes to be able to create this project that day, because I just didn't have time. So this is why I decided to go with the cable one. And that's it for this project. Sometimes when you don't have time, you just have to do with a pre-made asset that you already have. It was a fun series to make. I was able to focus a little bit on the shading and lighting side of things. And yeah, I will see you guys in the next one. Cheers.